Toyota recalls 8 million cars worldwide, the biggest ever recall in the automotive industry. What led to this? Is safety being compromised for technical innovation? And will Toyota ever be able to restore public trust? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mike Hanna. The image of the world's biggest car maker has been deeply tarnished. The recall of millions of vehicles for safety considerations has affected its sales and reputation. And now it's investigating safety issues in its flagship models, the latest Prius and Lexus hybrid cars. This move could cost Toyota some $2 billion and further undermine confidence in what was once the symbol of Japanese reliability. Azar Sukri has the details.
Built for luxury and extreme fuel efficiency, and sold on Toyota's reputation for reliability and safety. Launched last year, this Lexus petrol-electric hybrid was pitched to the high end of the global car market, but it has now become the latest symbol of Toyota's growing safety problems. The car giant says it's investigating a possible brake problem with the Lexus hybrid. It's the same issue some owners of the Toyota Prius have reported. This is Japan's best-selling car and globally the most popular hybrid. But some drivers of the latest version have said their brakes don't always engage as soon as the pedal is pressed down. A software change fixed the problem on cars sold since late January, but not for vehicles sold before then. Toyota is still deciding whether to recall the earlier Prius. The US government isn't waiting. It's launched its own investigation into the scope of the problem. Meanwhile, Toyota's reputation has taken a knock.
It's obviously a slight disaster for the company, but in certain respects I don't think it should be overblown.
I think it affects a lot of people anyway, because they depend on these cars. And Toyota, for example, is a brand name, worldwide name.
I'm a bit concerned, a bit worried, but the gentleman of Toyota said South Africans don't have to worry.
Toyota has recalled some 8 million vehicles worldwide, including 2.3 million in the United States, for the repair of sticking accelerator pedals in its 8 top-selling models. Toyota's already said the recalls and lost sales revenue will cost it $2 billion by March. The damage to its reputation is likely to be much harder to quantify. Azar Sukri, Al Jazeera.
We're now joined by our guests in Birmingham, David Bailey, a professor of economics at Coventry University and an expert on the global auto industry. From Milan, we have Mariana Mazzucato. She's the Professor of Economics of Innovation at the Open University in the UK and a visiting professor at the Bocconi Business School in Milan. And finally, Jay Magley joins us from London. He's a writer for the online motor journal autoblog.com and a motor industry analyst. Now, this is not an issue isolated to one model, one plant, or even a single technology. It's across the board. David Bailey, the first question to you, why are these safety issues so incredibly widespread?
Well, I think what we've seen in recent years is Toyota growing extremely quickly, over-expanding, to be honest. They have huge global capacity now, about 10 million units a year. They're not producing anywhere near that. And so they've been carrying a lot of dead weight, and they've been looking to cut costs. So they look to cut costs in sourcing components, in driving down prices, and in sharing those components across lots of different models, which all manufacturers do. But they do, in doing that, expose themselves to greater risks, because if something goes wrong, it doesn't just affect one model, but 3, 4, in this case 8. Something has clearly gone wrong with the accelerators. There's been a failure in design and in product testing. That now affects a whole range of cars.
Now, Mariana Mazzucato, this comes at a time when Toyota had record losses the year before, and yet within the last 12 months is announcing a handsome profit. Are these two issues connected with the safety results or lack of safety?
Well, I think that Toyota is actually in a very unique position in the sense that if you look at the history of the automobile industry, some people, for example, some experts on the auto industry from MIT actually maintain that there's been very little radical innovation in automobiles since 1940. And Toyota was, in fact, the leading innovator taking advantage of the new technological opportunity in the 1970s around small cars. Really at the expense of the big dinosaurs, so the big three US manufacturers. And in fact, I think the problem that it's currently encountering is that it too has become a dinosaur itself, and it has to find a way to, if you want, recapture that lean and flexible entrepreneurial spirit that it had in the 70s, where it was able to take advantage of that new technological opportunity. I think that its past growth has in fact been driven by the fact that it's really one of the most innovative companies in the car industry, which is not a very innovative industry. Most of the innovation in cars occurred just by filling up cars with IT gadgets. But how we drive cars today is not that different from how people drove cars in the 1940s.
Jay Megley, given that, do you think that Toyota might be cutting corners in the efforts to stay ahead of the pack?
Well, Toyota admitted about 18 months ago publicly that expansion had been too quickly. They'd been trying to develop models too quickly, and that from now on they would take longer to develop them. They would not concentrate so much on expansion. Obviously, as the recession came, that was no longer an option anyway for them. But they said that the development process would take longer, there would be more testing, and that within a couple of years, quality will be back to what everybody associated Toyota with. Toyota built its reputation on quality. They were never particularly enjoyable or dynamic cars to drive. That wasn't what Toyotas were about. They were about reliability and durability, and that's what attracted people in the 70s, particularly in America, where product quality was very poor. In Britain, again, product quality of Leyland cars, for example, appalling. So Toyota had a ready market to go for. They built a name on that. They admitted a couple of years ago they were starting to lose that, and they were desperate to get it back. Of course, what's happening now is that we're seeing emerging a problem associated with the cars, mostly designed and built a couple of years ago, at the very time when Toyota started admitting that they had lost their quality edge.
But let's go back to Mariana. What we are seeing as well, though, is problems, it appears, with its flagship cars and cars that are a new technology, relatively new technology, the very vehicles that it was hoping was going to put it ahead of the pack, Mariana.
Well, if you look at, I mean, anytime a new, if you want, big revolution occurs in an industry, it's usually, if you want, the smaller players that are able to be, if you want, more entrepreneurial, flexible, overcome organizational inertia. And in fact, I think a very surprising, if you want, fact in the car industry is that it was actually a very big player. Toyota is the leading car manufacturer in the world that has been able to take advantage of the green economy hybrid car. I think actually that's something that a lot of people in my area of economics, so industrial economics, where we look at the industry life cycle, that's a good counterexample to what we usually see. I think it would be in many industries, for example, in telecoms, also in pharmaceuticals, it's often the smaller firms that really do the very radical new stuff. So in pharmaceuticals, the large companies basically just concentrate on Me Too drugs, and it's the small biotech companies that come out with the new molecular entities. Toyota is a huge player that has actually been the one to lead in this major revolution in car production around hybrid. Around the hybrid car. That's actually something I think that it should be applauded for continuously, even through the current crisis it's going through, because it's quite unique.
Well, one must remember as well,
smaller players that enter an industry. Sorry?
Right, I just want to pick up on something. You know, one must remember as well that it's not the first time that Toyota has announced a car recall. In 2005, Toyota pulled out 1.4 million cars globally due to trouble with the headline system. But very important too is that Toyota is not the only big car company to take such action due to manufacturing defects. GM recalled nearly 6 million vehicles to fix various safety defects in 2004. 4 years later, 857,000 more cars were recalled due to a potential short-circuit problem. In 2007, Chrysler recalled over 500,000 cars due to issues with the gear shift. And last year, Ford completed a series of recalls affecting 14 million vehicles due to a faulty cruise control deactivation switch. And last month, Honda recalled 646,000 cars globally over a faulty window switch. And right now, Peugeot Citroën is preparing to recall over 100,000 cars made at the same plant as a Toyota model. Let's bring in David Bailey. These figures are in a way quite staggering, but are they reflective of failing safety standards within the industry or a greater awareness among the people that drive the vehicles?
Well, what that actually says is that product recalls are actually pretty frequent. We've seen product quality improve over the years, and often they are precautionary measures by manufacturers to recall cars to make sure that they're okay and to reassure customers. I think the problem with Toyota is threefold. Firstly, the scale of the problem. 4 million cars being recalled January, February this year for accelerator problems. Go back to November, another 4 million in the US for accelerator problems. 700,000 last summer because of window problems, electrics. And then go back to January last year, problems with exhaust systems and seatbelts. So it's the frequency with which this is happening. So as one of your other guests was saying, this goes back to a time when Toyota had really taken its eye off the ball on the quality as they were expanding so quickly. And these problems are now coming through. That reflects a failure to actually test the products properly in the first place. But the third problem is that their whole brand has been built about reliability. So these were never fantastically exciting cars to drive, but you could rely on them. And now all of a sudden there is a feeling that, well, maybe that's not the case anymore. And I think it will take time for Toyota to recover from that. On the latest cutting-edge products, like the Prius, these are more complicated and they are technologically more challenging. It is great that Toyota is leading on this, but for example, you look at the brake problem, it's because you've got two different types of braking, traditional friction brakes, alongside electric motors which are used to regenerate energy, and you have to coordinate them. There's been a software problem with that. Now, the problem here is in part the way they've dealt with it. They have not communicated that very well to customers. They fixed it in new cars. They didn't do anything about existing cars until prompted by the government.
All right, well, that whole question of the brand Toyota. Now, last year, a new president took over at Toyota. He was Akio Toyoda, who was the grandson of the man that actually invented the company. Well, he has recently apologized for the problems and ensured that the safety of the customer is a priority.
Please accept my sincere apologies for the great inconvenience and concerns of a large number of our customers in many regions of the world due to recalls for multiple models.
Believe me, Toyota's car is safety, but we are trying to increase our product better. So this kind of procedure is good for the customers. So please believe me, we always customer first is first priority.
Jay Magley in London, is this going to reassure the customers, those loyal Toyota customers?
Well, it's quite interesting case, this new chairman, Toyota. He was publicly warning Toyota months ago that it was a company in decline. He'd been reading a book, an American book, with the title of something like How the Mighty Fall, and he said that Toyota is a classic case of a company that's grown to be dominant in its industry, has developed a kind of hubris, a pride in what it's done, and has lost track of what the customers want, and that Toyota has got to the last stage when it can reform itself and refocus itself. And in fact, he writes a motoring blog under an alias, and he, amazingly for a Japanese boss, drove a Volkswagen Sirocco and simply said in review, "I am jealous of this car. This is a sort of exciting, dynamic and high-quality car we should be making." So he's in absolutely no doubt that Toyota is facing problems. He's actually been talking up the problems, if anything. Although, unfortunately, his public statement of apology was a bit late, and I think Toyota has struggled over the last couple of weeks to get ahead of this story. They've been given the impression, rightly or wrongly, that the facts have kind of been dragged out of them rather than them really becoming proactive. And I think the biggest problem is that now a kind of narrative is starting to form that there are quality problems at Toyota. In fact, the problem with the Prius and the Lexus hybrid, as was said earlier, is to do with the regenerative braking system, which is also shared by a Ford product in America. But there isn't a narrative about Ford quality problems. That hasn't hit the news. A few years ago, there was a big problem with Mercedes braking systems. They introduced a new electronic braking system that didn't work. They had to have a big recall, but everyone assumed Mercedes quality was good. It didn't form part of a wider narrative. There has been so many Toyota stories. There's now a narrative about quality being a problem at Toyota. And once a narrative has been formed, that's very difficult to get rid of.
David Bailey, you wanted to add to that?
Absolutely. In fact, this president said last year when they unveiled their first loss in 71 years that Toyota was on the brink, quote, of irrelevance or death. So they are aware that the company is in crisis in some sense, that they have grown too quickly, they have become over-bloated, they've taken their eye off the ball on quality, and that they fundamentally need to reform things. The problem for them is that the issues now surfacing go back before then. They go back several years, they're now coming home to roost, and they actually need to, I think, radically reform the company. One of the first steps, which is absolutely right, is bringing in outside help. And I think that they need to take that much further. We alluded earlier on to other industries like the pharmaceutical industry. Well, if you look at that industry, a lot of the cutting-edge technology isn't developed by big firms but by small firms, which are then picked up by the big players in what we might call an open innovation system. And I think a lot of the new technologies that the car companies need to develop, they're going to have to work with other companies to do that. But it does raise a whole set of issues around quality control and how you put that together.
Mariana Mazzucato, that particular point, the quality control when you are introducing new technologies in a very competitive economic environment. Are these quality controls greater? Must they be greater when you have technological advances?
Well, in fact, there's a big debate around that because a lot of companies are actually scared, for example, of regulation because they say that that inhibits innovation. In fact, there's plenty of evidence that regulation forces you to be more creative. In fact, in some ways to get around the regulation, but also if you want to be able to deal with the new rules, you can't just keep, if you want, with the status quo, you need to invent around it. So definitely in IT, in pharmaceuticals, I know that there's been some very interesting studies that have shown that regulation, in fact, fosters innovation, as long as it's done in a good way. I actually just wanted to come back quickly to the point that was made around Jim Collins' book, How the Mighty Fall, that I think that President Toyoda showed in the first instance a remarkable way to, in fact, foresee problems and to come clean. I mean, he stated that Toyota was in the 4th stage of the 5 stages in which a company falls, way before these recalls. And now he's been accused of actually, if you want, admitting problems too late. So you have this ironic situation where I think he's the only president in the history of capitalism that I know of who, you know, states that his own company is about to die, basically. I mean, that's not very good for your stock price, we know. And he refers to this important, if you want, strategy guru. And then once the recalls happen, he instead does the exact opposite. He, you know, acts, again, like a dinosaur and doesn't react to it, basically does a huge public relations disaster around it. So I think maybe that the poor guy is just a little bit awkward, but very smart underneath.
Well, we've been talking about the technologies, the company protocols, but there's another issue here as well, with some 8 million cars recalled for safety reasons. And basically, Jay Megley, should people be worried? Should they be scared of driving? How serious is the threat to individual personal safety?
Well, certainly in Europe, there have been no reports of any major accidents because of this accelerator pedal problem. As far as we know, it is a problem to do with the friction in the pedal, and that when it gets worn, it may not return to the neutral position quickly enough, or may possibly be stuck partly open. In America, there have been allegations of accidents being caused by this. They're still under investigation. So as far as the European market's concerned, if no accidents are found to have been caused by this, nobody's been seriously injured, it will be just another recall. And after all, in a paradoxical way, it's reassuring for the public that if there is a problem, cars get recalled. It's been a long time since a major safety issue was swept under the carpet, or a car manufacturer tried to sweep it under the carpet, because they all know what happened in the past when they tried to do that. Ford tried to not modify the design of the Ford Pinto in the 1970s, and it cost them hundreds of millions in 1970s prices, and eventually the Pinto had to be withdrawn because it got a reputation for its fuel tanks exploding in accidents. So everybody's very conscious of that. And just to go back to one earlier point, the interesting thing about Toyota hybrids is the really complicated technology, synchronising electric motor, the petrol engine and the drivetrain. There hasn't been a single failure reported ever of one of those. What's happened now with the braking system is there's a small software glitch which isn't synchronising the electric motor braking, the regenerative braking, and the normal braking, which actually is a relatively simple fix. And it's ironic that something so simple is a bit that went wrong. The really complicated technology actually hasn't failed at all, and it is a credit to Toyota. They've managed to make millions of hybrids with very advanced technology and no major failures in the core systems.
Well, words of encouragement there, but I'd like to ask David Bailey that same question. Is there a threat to individual safety in this, or is it a matter simply of economics and technological advancement?
Well, usually product recalls are precautionary. In terms of if a consumer has a specific question or concern about their Toyota, go back to their dealer, ask them to look into it, get it fixed. Toyota have got to move on this very quickly. I think I'm not a crisis management expert, but it seems to me that one of the key things to do is to identify the problem, isolate it, deal with it quickly, and communicate with customers. Unfortunately, Toyota have not done that. It seems that they knew about potential problems with accelerators going back to 2008, 2009, did not inform the authorities until much later, and the problems have come out this year and are only now recalling cars. So they should have done much more about this much earlier, even if it isn't a safety issue. And even now, we're still getting very mixed messages from them about the Prius. It seems to be that they're heading towards a recall of the latest Prius model, but they have not yet said that unless they've announced it today. And so we're getting very mixed messages from them yet again. It's far better to come out clean, identify a problem, fix it quickly and reassure customers. Mariana Mazzucato, we're running out of time at the moment, but final question to you, and that is, has this whole scare, this whole series of events of recalls actually done one good thing, and that is focused on safety standards and focused on an industry that is very, very fast moving in a technological way?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's an appropriate time to be thinking about that, because I think a lot of us would agree that the only cure for the current crisis and recession is if you want companies to start thinking about long-run growth around, if you want technological innovation, as opposed to just if you want short-term growth, which is going to be put again into crisis as soon as the next bubble bursts. We have evidence, if you want, that the companies that are surviving right now, the bubble bursting, are in fact the ones that have invested more in innovation in the past. So Toyota is for sure one of those companies. And I think if someone starts to dig deeper beneath the story and not just accepting, if you want, the Toyota bashing that we're seeing in the newspapers, it's impossible to deny that Toyota is a very innovative company and has been one that is innovative in, again, a very mature industry, which is a dangerous industry to be in, because those are the industries where you usually have a lot of price wars, where competition is done through marketing as opposed to real product innovation. And they somehow, compete and win the game with product innovation, even in a mature phase. And that, again, as I said before, is quite unique. And hopefully Toyota will gain by this, by, if you want viewers, actually through the internet, if you want, to actually try to get the story themselves, as opposed to just the headlines that we're seeing, which is...
Well, clearly an issue that is beyond a single manufacturer. Thank you very much to all our guests. In Birmingham, David Bailey. In Milan, Mariana Mazzucato. And in London, Jay Magley. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Mike Hanna. Goodbye for now.